Lila Thompson was halfway through her morning routine when her phone rang. The screen flashed a name she recognized immediately, Maya Evans, her neighbor. Lila answered with a polite hello, expecting the usual small talk about the apartment or some trivial neighborhood matter. Instead, Maya's voice came hurried and slightly tense. Lila, I know this is sudden, but my family had to leave for the village today. Would you mind cooking dinner for us? Just for tonight? Lila hesitated for a brief moment. It wasn't that she disliked helping, but she barely knew the man who would be in the house. Maya's husband was away, and her children were all out with cousins. And yet, something in Maya's voice conveyed urgency, not desperate, just pressing enough to tug at Lila's sense of duty. Okay, she said finally, trying to sound casual. I can do that. Maya let out a relieved sigh. Thank you so much, Lila. I really appreciate it. Derek, he'll be there. Just follow the instructions. I'll text you. After the call ended, Lila found herself staring at the ceiling. Derek, she knew he was Maya's longtime friend, a man who had visited occasionally, but she had never really interacted with him. The thought of spending time in someone else's kitchen with a stranger made her stomach twist with nervous anticipation. Still, a small part of her was curious. Who was this man beyond the brief, polite greetings at the mailbox? She spent the next hour preparing. Nothing too fancy, just enough to make a proper dinner without feeling out of her depth. She packed her bag with the ingredients Maya had texted her about: chicken, fresh vegetables, and some spices. The walk to Derek's house was short, but her mind raced. What kind of person would she find behind that door? Friendly? Grumpy? Polite? Perhaps overly proud of his kitchen skills? When Lila arrived, she paused briefly in front of the door, collecting herself. The house was well kept, modern yet inviting. Potted plants lined the small porch, and she noticed the faint aroma of spices already in the air. Either Derek had started cooking, or the place always smelled this way. She rang the bell. A few moments later, the door opened. Derek stood there, tall, with a composed yet warm demeanor. His hair had flecks of gray, and his eyes carried the calm of someone used to observing before acting. You must be Lila, he said in a low, pleasant voice. Thank you for coming. Hi, yes? I got Maya's message, Lila replied, stepping inside. The interior was tidy, with hints of personality, framed pictures, a bookshelf stacked neatly, and a few travel souvenirs. It spoke of someone who appreciated order and aesthetics. Derek gestured toward the kitchen. I was just getting things ready. I hope the instructions were clear. Yes, I think so, Lila said, unpacking the ingredients. Her hands moved almost on autopilot, chopping vegetables, seasoning the chicken, while Derek observed quietly. The atmosphere was calm, yet there was an unspoken tension. It wasn't uncomfortable, but it made Lila acutely aware of her own presence in the room. As she worked, Derek spoke in a measured tone. Maya said you're quite good at cooking. Lila smiled lightly, trying to mask her nervousness. I can manage. I've cooked for friends before, nothing fancy. He nodded, a faint smile forming. Good enough for me. I don't cook much myself, though I can follow instructions if necessary. There was a brief silence as they both focused on their tasks. Lila couldn't help but notice the contrast between his composed exterior and the slight tension in his movements. Derek was careful, precise, yet something about the way he handled the utensils hinted at experience. It wasn't just cooking, it was a small dance of familiarity and intent. Do you cook often? Derek asked suddenly. Occasionally, Lila replied. Mostly for friends or family. Cooking alone, not so much. It feels strange. I understand, he said, his voice carrying a trace of nostalgia. I grew up in a household where cooking was a necessity. Not everyone enjoys it, though. The conversation continued in soft, easy tones. Lila found herself relaxing slightly. Derek wasn't imposing, he was polite, and there was an unspoken civility to his presence. Yet, something about him intrigued her. Maybe it was the calm authority in his voice, or perhaps it was the subtle warmth in his eyes when he watched her work. Half an hour later, the kitchen was filled with the aromas of a nearly finished meal. Lila wiped her hands on a towel, glancing at Derek. "It smells nice." He smiled, a rare, small expression that seemed genuine. "You've done well. Maya will be pleased." Lila felt a small swell of pride. Despite the initial hesitation and nervousness, she had managed. And yet, there was a lingering curiosity. Derek's polite exterior hinted at stories untold, past experiences, and perhaps even a loneliness that he didn't reveal easily. As she cleaned the last of the dishes, Derek moved around with quiet efficiency, fetching utensils and checking the oven. They worked side by side, occasionally exchanging brief glances or remarks. Lila realized that despite the age difference and initial awkwardness, there was a rhythm to this partnership, a subtle connection that didn't require words to acknowledge. Finally, the meal was ready. Lila set the dishes on the table, stepping back to admire the result. Derek looked over, his gaze calm but appreciative. "Thank you again, Lila. You made this much easier than I expected." "It was no trouble," she said softly, though her heart still fluttered slightly at his words. She knew that tonight had only just begun. There was something unspoken in the room, a tension, a curiosity, a connection waiting to be explored. But for now, she smiled politely, took a deep breath, and prepared to leave, unaware that the events of this evening would linger in her mind far longer than the simple act of cooking dinner. After finishing the last of the dishes, Lila lingered for a moment, unsure whether to leave immediately or stay a little longer. Derek moved around the kitchen with quiet efficiency, placing the plates neatly on the counter and arranging the cutlery. The way he handled the space, calm and deliberate, gave Lila an odd sense of comfort. It wasn't just a kitchen anymore. It felt like a temporary world where the usual rules of time and routine softened, and she could just exist without outside pressures. "Would you like some tea before you go?" Derek asked suddenly, breaking the silence. Lila paused. It was a simple gesture, but there was something gentle about it, something that made her heart beat a little faster. "Yes, thank you," she replied, smiling softly. While he prepared the tea, Lila found herself noticing small details about him. The way he carefully measured the leaves, the faint line of gray in his hair, the calm intensity in his eyes when he concentrated. Derek returned with 2 cups, placing one gently in front of her. Their hands brushed slightly, and a small shiver ran through her, though she quickly looked away, pretending to focus on the steam rising from the cup. As they sipped quietly, Derek spoke, his tone conversational but laced with an unexpected depth. "Maya says you're quite independent. You live alone, right?" "Yes," Lila answered. "I've been on my own for a few years now. It's quiet most of the time, but I manage." She paused, considering whether to say more, then decided against it. Instead, she asked, "What about you? Do you live here alone?" Derek nodded, his gaze distant for a moment. "Yes, it's just me most of the time. I travel occasionally, but this has been my home for a while now. Quiet, comfortable, sometimes too quiet." He chuckled softly, a sound that was warm but carried an undertone of melancholy. There was a pause, filled only by the soft clink of their teacups and the faint hum of the refrigerator. Lila realized how easy it was to speak in this quiet space, how natural it felt to exchange small pieces of their lives without fear of judgment. Derek's presence was calming, yet it also stirred something within her, a curiosity, a desire to know more about the man behind the polite smile. "I've always wondered," Derek began carefully, "how people manage to balance being alone with the need for connection. It's complicated." Lila tilted her head, intrigued. "Complicated how?" He leaned back slightly, gazing out the window at the fading light. "You meet people, you interact, you build routines, but sometimes you wonder if anyone truly understands what you're thinking, what you're feeling. Most connections are fleeting, temporary. Even friendships have their limits." Lila nodded slowly, feeling an unexpected kinship with him. She understood that sentiment all too well. There were connections she had in her life, yes, but few that reached past the surface. And yet, sitting here with Derek, it felt as if an invisible thread had already formed, linking their quiet loneliness together. The conversation drifted naturally into lighter territory. They shared small stories about childhood memories, places they had visited, and meals that had left a lasting impression. Derek spoke of a cafe in New Orleans where he had once lived, and the aroma of freshly baked bread that had followed him for years. Lila laughed softly at a story of him attempting to bake bread for the first time and failing spectacularly. Hours seemed to pass unnoticed. Lila found herself enjoying the company more than she expected. Derek's humor was subtle, his presence steady, and though there was no romantic intent in his words, there was a warmth that drew her in. She realized that she hadn't felt this ease with someone in a long time. Then, an unexpected mishap occurred. While reaching for a bowl, Lila accidentally knocked over a small container of spices, sending its contents spilling across the counter. She gasped, startled. Derek was at her side, instantly helping her clean up. Their hands brushed several times as they worked together to sweep the mess into a dustpan. "Careful," Derek said softly, a faint smile playing at his lips. "It's okay. No harm done." Lila felt a small flutter in her chest. There was something about the way he said it, not patronizing, not distant, but kind, attentive, and almost protective. She realized then that there was a subtle tension building between them, not romantic in the obvious sense, but a quiet, compelling pull. As the evening progressed, the meal finally came together and they sat down to eat. Conversation flowed easily, sometimes thoughtful, sometimes light, but always with a sense of intimacy that neither had anticipated. Lila found herself drawn to the calm authority in Derek's voice, the understated humor in his stories, and the small kindnesses he offered without expecting anything in return. At some point, Lila noticed the sun had nearly set. The soft orange glow filtered through the windows, casting long shadows across the kitchen floor. It was beautiful, almost cinematic, and it made the quiet evening feel suspended in time. She realized that she had spent hours here, engaged in a connection that was deeper than mere politeness or obligation. Yet alongside the comfort, there was an undeniable awareness of boundaries. Lila knew that this was Maya's house, that she was a guest, and that Derek's friendliness, though appealing, was not an invitation beyond civility. Still, the tension lingered in subtle gestures. The way he passed her the plate, the brief contact of hands, the shared laughter over small mistakes. Finally, Lila began to gather her things. "I should probably head home," she said softly, though she was reluctant to break the spell of the evening. Derek nodded, standing with her. "Of course. Thank you for helping tonight. It means a lot." "Thank you for letting me be here," Lila replied, feeling the weight of her emotions. As she stepped out the door and walked back through the quiet streets toward her apartment, she reflected on the evening. It had been simple, mundane even, but beneath the surface there was a complexity of emotion she hadn't expected. Curiosity, tension, empathy, and an unspoken connection lingered in her mind. She knew one thing: this encounter, brief and ordinary on the surface, would stay with her. There was something about Derek, something about the quiet intimacy of shared moments, that made her heart beat a little faster and her thoughts wander longer than she cared to admit. Lila reached her apartment and paused at the doorway, glancing back in the direction of Maya's house. She couldn't explain why, but she felt a pull, a curiosity that was both unsettling and fascinating. She had crossed no lines, yet the emotional tension was undeniable. And as she entered her quiet space, she realized that tonight had changed something inside her. Something subtle, something emotional, something that she wasn't sure she was ready to understand fully. The next morning, Lila woke up with a quiet tension lingering in her chest. Memories of the previous evening replayed in her mind, the gentle warmth in Derek's tone, the unspoken connection they had shared, the way their hands had brushed during the small mishap in the kitchen. She shook her head lightly, trying to dismiss the fluttering in her stomach. It had been nothing, just an ordinary evening spent helping a neighbor. Yet her thoughts betrayed her. She couldn't ignore the pull she had felt. As she went about her routine, she found herself glancing at her phone, half expecting a message from Derek. Hours passed, and when a soft ping finally notified her of a text, her heart skipped a beat. It was him. "Good morning, Lila. I hope you made it home safely. I wanted to thank you again for last night. Your help meant a lot. Perhaps we could do this again sometime. Coffee, maybe?" Lila stared at the message, her mind racing. Coffee. A casual, innocent suggestion, yet it carried a weight she hadn't anticipated. She typed a reply slowly, weighing her words carefully. "Good morning. Yes, I made it safely. Thank you for the evening. Coffee sounds fine, perhaps another time when it's convenient." She hit send before second-guessing herself, her fingers trembling slightly. Even the simple act of responding felt charged with unspoken tension. She put her phone down and tried to focus on her day, but the memory of Derek's calm presence clung to her thoughts like a shadow she couldn't shake. Later in the afternoon, there was movement outside her apartment. Maya had returned, her laughter ringing through the hallway, followed by the distant chatter of her children. Lila's heart sank slightly. The ordinary bustle of neighbors returning from a trip reminded her that her connection with Derek existed in a fragile, fleeting space, temporary, suspended, yet full of potential energy she couldn't ignore. She busied herself with chores, trying to distract her mind, but the memory of the evening lingered. The way Derek's hand had hovered near hers, the warmth in his eyes, the small, gentle smiles exchanged across the kitchen. She knew she had crossed no lines physically, yet emotionally she felt a subtle shift, a connection that could grow if left unchecked. That evening, a small envelope appeared at her door. It was simple, unadorned, with her name written neatly in Derek's handwriting. Her pulse quickened as she carefully opened it. Inside was a note. "Lila, I hope this doesn't intrude, but I wanted to thank you properly. Last night was unexpected in the best way. I hope we can continue our conversation soon. Derek." A smile tugged at the corners of her lips, mixed with a blush she couldn't hide. It was a thoughtful, innocent gesture, yet it carried the weight of an unspoken invitation. She realized then that the emotional connection they shared was becoming something she couldn't simply ignore. The following days were filled with a quiet tension. Lila found herself thinking of Derek at odd moments, while making tea, walking home, even in the pauses between her work tasks. She wondered what it would be like to see him again, to hear his calm voice, to engage in those small, intimate conversations that had left her feeling so understood. Yet, alongside the curiosity, there was restraint. She reminded herself constantly that this was Maya's home, that Derek was a guest in her life by circumstance, not by choice, and that crossing certain boundaries could change everything. The thrill of the emotional tension was intoxicating, but she refused to let it control her actions. One evening, Derek sent another message. "Lila, if you're free tomorrow evening, I thought we could meet at the cafe I mentioned. It would be nice to talk outside the kitchen for change." Lila stared at the screen, weighing her choices. A simple coffee meeting seemed harmless enough, yet she understood the delicate balance between curiosity and propriety. After a moment, she typed, "All right, tomorrow evening works. Thank you." The next day, Lila approached the cafe with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. She arrived early, finding a quiet table in the corner, observing the sunlight filtering through the windows. Derek arrived a few minutes later, his familiar, calm presence filling the space. They exchanged greetings, polite and warm, settling into a rhythm of conversation that was comfortable yet charged with unspoken emotion. They spoke about mundane things, books, music, local news, but every word carried a subtle weight, every gesture a quiet intimacy. Lila realized how rare it was to feel so understood, so acknowledged without expectation. The emotional tension from the kitchen had shifted, evolved into something more refined, connection, empathy, and a shared understanding that went beyond words. After the meeting, they walked briefly along the streets, enjoying the evening air. Derek paused, looking at her with a measured gaze. "Lila, I appreciate your presence, your honesty, your warmth. Last night, and now today, it's refreshing. I don't often meet people with whom I can share simple moments without pretense. Lila felt a warmth spread through her chest. I understand. It's comforting to be around someone who listens, who notices the small things. They parted with a polite farewell, yet Lila lingered, reflecting on the emotions stirring within her. She realized that while the situation was delicate, it had taught her something important. The value of connection, the thrill of curiosity, and the need to navigate desire with care. Back in her apartment, she sat quietly, considering the events of the past few days. There had been no betrayal, no explicit crossing of boundaries, only moments of emotional honesty and connection. And yet, the story was far from over. There was tension, intrigue, and potential for further encounters that would continue to challenge her understanding of herself and the boundaries she had carefully maintained. She took a deep breath, letting the evening calm her. Lila understood that life was filled with unexpected meetings, moments that could stir emotions and challenge morality, and that navigating them required awareness, restraint, and reflection. Derek's presence had been a subtle disruption in her routine, a quiet test of her heart and mind, and she welcomed it cautiously, thoughtfully, and with a sense of curiosity about what might come next. The evening ended with Lila looking out the window, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance. She smiled faintly, knowing that some connections are meant to linger in thought and emotion, shaping decisions and feelings long after the moments themselves have passed. And for now, that was enough.